Welcome to Typevolution. You can call me Olympia. This video series is about the instinctual stackings as monsters, or in other words, horror archetypes. This is the first video in the series, with the main topic being the self-preservation/sexual stacking. Supposedly, this is the stacking that came into existence first, more on that later. First, what are the instinctual stackings? The instinctual stackings derive from the personality theory of the three instincts, which is most notably mentioned in the enneagram. The three instincts are self-preservation, sexual, and social, and abbreviated as SP, SX, and SO. These three instincts are ordered from most personally valuable to least personally valuable in each individual, creating 6 stackings: SPSX, SXSO, SOSP, SPSO, SOSX, and SXSP. You can group the stackings into so-called flows. The synth flow, going with the flow of life, the mainstream, which are SPSO, SOSX, and SXSP. Or contraflow, going against the flow of life, SPSX, SXSO, and SOSP. I recommend you to watch my previous videos about the instincts, which I also call drives because they drive us deep down, before continuing with this video. Second, what do I mean by horror archetypes? Across world literature, art, folklore, and other tales in media, you can come across several archetypal characters that represent different parts and aspects of the human psyche in its most glorious and most despicable forms. Suitable to the time of Halloween, I decided to focus on the monsters, or horror archetypes, that represent the dark essences of the instinctual stackings. We all have a monster awake or asleep inside of us, at the bottom of the ocean of our consciousness. When we become mentally unhealthy, the monster awakes and creates destruction, chaos, and death in our lives, and at worst, also the lives of others. This inner monster is symbolically represented by horror or dark archetypes in our tales. Monsters are typically very instinctually driven, hence I found the connection between monster archetypes and instinctual stackings the most fitting. Without further ado, let's get to the SPSX dark side. As mentioned earlier, current theory suggests that the self-preservation instinct is the base of existence, that it is the most essential drive, the drive of preserving life and physical forms. You can see this drive being the primary force in most animals, followed by the sexual instinct, the drive to attract, find a partner, mate, and propagate the species. In that way, it can be said that the SPSX stacking is the most primal, especially once it descends into darkness. We humans are supposed to be the most quote-unquote social species, hence the social last stackings, like SPSX and SXSP, tend to be the least traditionally human. In the case of SPSX, this is especially boosted or emphasized by the fact that the stacking's primary drive is preservation, and it is a so-called contraflow stacking, rendering SPSX the most animalistic. That does not mean that SPSX people are all uncultured, stupid, or any other negative trait you might think of. They can be intelligent, acute, and socially aware. However, it does mean that when this stacking becomes unhealthy, it becomes the most classically horrific and monster-like, as if the human is entirely driven by its reptilian brain. After I had typed several SPSX monsters, most monsters seem SPSX, probably for the same reasons I already mentioned, I came to the conclusion that they can all be summarized as the human turned beast. I included the term turned because a key aspect of the condition is typically a gradual transformation or the back and forth between the human and beast-like state. This transformational aspect is related to the sexual instinct, which goes from separate elements to unified transformed creation, such as human life. But in this case, the human is reduced to its primal preservation, such as food and self-sustenance, to stay alive, and the sexual instinct is reduced to animalistic, grotesque mating or disheartened eroticism. The act of feeding on one's victims, objects of desire, is a mix of the self-preservation and sexual instincts at their horrific worst. The ingestion of humans becomes similar to both a self-preserving and a sexual act. This is often shown or symbolized as some form of cannibalism. Social norms or social relevancy are ignored or transgressed. The social world plays no major part. Now I give you examples of the monsters from the first unhealthy darkness stage to the second to the third, the absolute worst. Stage 1 of darkness. At the first stage, moments of wickedness or beast-like proportions periodically become present, but overall this person is still very aware and in control of their darkness, and easily passes as human if they want to. They can even use their darkness for good in certain situations. One example is Geralt from The Witcher. He is primarily concerned with his coins, aka money, making a living by fighting monsters, which occasionally forces him to tap into his own dark, beast-like self. In the background, he's also concerned with his love for Yennefer. Stage 2 of darkness. At the second stage, the beast state and wickedness become more pronounced, extreme, and persistent, but the person still retains a resemblance to their human self and some control over their evil actions. The evil witch from the German fairy tale Hänsel und Gretel is a classic manifestation of the dark SPSX solitary witch, which lives removed from society deep in the woods, guarding her house, collecting riches, and, at the worst, seduces children with her candy and eats them, if she gets the chance. Hannibal Lecter also prefers being a cannibal. He is a connoisseur for human flesh and the arts, and he has an eerie, seductive streak that he uses on Clarice. He looks and acts human with ease, but his cannibalistic self can suddenly burst out and reveal his dark side, which takes away the life of others. The classic werewolf archetype borders on the next stage because it has an animalistic form that cannot be controlled under the full moon and makes him attack others. However, their ability to come across as human and keep their sanity most other times makes this a stage 2 example. Similarly, the beast from the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast is another example of the essential werewolf archetype. A prince was turned into a beast due to his selfishness and rejection of a witch. He is tied to his castle, overly protective of his garden and estate, and obsessed with marrying the beauty to break his curse. The classic Nosferatu is the SPSX variant of the vampire, consumed by his thirst for blood, which can seem erotic. Also, he is bound to live near his coffin in the soil of his homeland, a clear fixation on self-preservation first. But otherwise, he can almost live like a normal man, and he desires the love of a human woman. Stage 3 of darkness. At the last, final stage, the person is entirely reduced to its monster state, to the point of being a total beast or animal. They lack any control over the transformation or reckless, brutal actions. Zombies. They are a key archetype for this, with some rotten resemblance of their human self, but overall they are consumed by their hunger for brains, which can seem like a grotesquely intimate process when they consume it. The pale man from Pan's Labyrinth is also a cannibal, but he does not appear to have much control over his actions, and his appearance is even less human-like. The Fly is transgressing to the worst, a human whose physical self deteriorates into the form of a fly, and he obsesses over losing his human self and his love interest. Now we are at the end of the examples. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. I selected certain monsters or archetypes over others because they were the most straightforward and primarily focused on the expression and nature of the instinctual drives. Though some examples might be relatable to you even if they do not have the same instinctual stacking as you, but just because they have the same enneagram type as you, so be aware of that. In that case, compare yourself to the other examples in this video. Do they also suit your horror side? Then you could also be the SPSX stacking. If not, then probably not. Don't be swayed too much by which monsters you like the most, but rather which ones seem most relatable to your own instinctual drives. Also, you should know that some monsters, such as the witch archetype, can span across several different stackings, based on the representation and the zeitgeist it originated from. So the archetype of the witch as a whole can be relatable to several stackings. In this video, I of course focus on the SPSX version. At last, I want to point out that our inner monster awakes the more we fail to tend to our instincts. In the case of SPSX, matters of self-preservation and then the sexual instinct got out of hand and its needs could not be met. The person's instinctual being is suffering. The more so, the worse the monster will be. The only way to prevent this from happening or to reverse the process is to meet the needs of the instincts. I go more in detail with this in my previous videos and probably future videos to come. Okay, so that was that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, share and subscribe. You can hear me or see me, let's see, in the next one. Bye!